All right, so I think it's late morning or early afternoon. I'm not sure what time it is. But I did a recording this morning and yesterday morning, a live feed on my YouTube channel. And when I watched them, it's a really bad recording. So I'm going to try to start pre-recording my videos because I feel like some of this stuff is very relevant to me, in the respects that I started to write a book about my life after my son was killed. And a lot of the stuff I wrote spontaneously came to me, and it appeared in writing with very mythological themes and motifs and Christian motifs and themes, because I grew up in the Baptist church and for a short period of time. And I think people who read it maybe misunderstood it because I was suddenly being spiritually attacked from all angles by the church, by people who are well practiced in witchcraft, and I really wanted, and I had, dare I say, visions, because no, that doesn't make me crazy. Something very traumatic happened to me when my son was killed. He had cerebral palsy, and he meant the world to me. And to watch him suffer at the hands of the court system and even his own paternal grandmother and his father brought a lot of internal suffering to me. And I did blame myself quite a bit. And I was doing a lot of meditation with chakra work, and I believe my Kundalini was activated, and I had something called a spiritual emergency, and it did create visions and psychic intuitions. So I'm trying to figure out what the psychological reasoning behind all of this is. So I'm reading this book by Carl Jung called Man and His Symbols, which talks about archetypes, which I was reading another book, which I now have finished, by Carolyn Miss, titled Your Sacred Contract, where she talks about archetypes and how important they are to the behavior that we have, the patterns we create in our lives. And Carl Jung in this book is talking about the collective unconscious. And so some of the stuff that this book brings up is very relevant to my experience, and I think it is possibly very relevant to other people's life experience. And for some reason, when I'm recording live, some of the most important things I read and reflect on are robotized out. Like I don't know if it's done on purpose or not, but it's just interesting to me that the most important aspects of some of these chapters that I'm picking up and speaking on in reflection of my own personal life, it's inaudible. So I'm going to try to pre-record and post to my YouTube channel. So I'm going to read again the small segment I read on Tuesday, which is called Healing the Split. And then I'm going to post it and see if that does the trick. So here we go. Healing the Split. Ow. Excuse me, I have to itch my foot. So yeah, I'm out in a public place in my cute little town that I live in. Okay, healing the split. Our intellect has created a new world that dominates nature and has populated it with monstrous machines. The latter are so indubitably useful that we cannot see even a possibility of getting rid of them or our subservience to them. Man is bound to follow the adventurous promptings of his scientific and inventive mind and to admire himself for his splendid achievements. At the same time, his genius shows the uncanny tendency to invent things that become more and more dangerous. Because they represent better and better means for wholesale suicide. In view of the rapidly increasing avalanche of world's population, man has already begun to seek ways and means of keeping the rising flood at bay. But nature may anticipate all our attempts by turning against man his own creative mind. The H-bomb, for instance, would put an effective stop to overpopulation. In spite of our proud domination of nature, we are still her victims, for we have not even learned to control our own nature. And considering we're part of nature, right? Slowly, but it appears inevitably, we are courting disaster. There are no longer any gods whom we can invoke to help us. The great religions of the world suffer from increasing anemia, because the helpful noumena, which I looked up yesterday and I had a hard time finding it, and one of my followers, Lovebug, looked it up for me, but I looked it up again and I wrote it down, and it's noumena is plural to the word numen, which means divine presence or divine will. So, where's that sentence that I was just reading? Here it is. The great religions of the world suffer from increasing anemia because the helpful noumena have fled from the woods, rivers, and mountains, and from animals. And God-men have disappeared underground into the unconscious. There we fool ourselves that they lead an ignominious existence. Now, I wrote that one down as well, and I wrote the pronunciation. I looked at the pronunciation, but I didn't write it down. I don't think I'm saying it right. Ignominious, it means deserving or causing public disgrace or shame. They led an ignominious existence among the relics of our past. Our present lives are dominated by the goddess Reason, who is our greatest and most tragic illusion. By the aid of reason, so we assure ourselves we have conquered nature. But this is a mere slogan, for the so-called conquest of nature overwhelms us with the natural fact of overpopulation and adds to our troubles by our psychological incapacity to make the necessary political arrangements. It remains quite natural for men to quarrel and to struggle for superiority over one another. How then have we conquered nature? As any change must begin somewhere, it is the single individual who will experience it and carry it through. The change must indeed begin with the individual. And like I said in my recording, my live recording, isn't that the cliche? You can't fix anything unless you fix yourself. The change must indeed begin with an individual. It might be any one of us. Nobody can afford to look round and to wait for somebody else to do what it is he loathes to do himself. But since nobody seems to know what to do, it might be worthwhile for each of us to ask himself whether, by any chance, his or her unconscious may know something that will help us. Certainly, the conscious mind seems unable to do anything useful in this respect. Man today is painfully aware of the fact that neither his great religions nor his various philosophies seem to provide him with those powerful animating ideas that would give him the security he needs in face of the present condition of the world. And this is referring to the communist era, but I mean it applies now. I know what the Buddhists would say. Things would go right if people would only follow the noble eightfold path of Dharma, doctrine, law, and had true insight into the self. The Christians tell us that if only people had faith in God, we should have a better world. The rationalists insists that if people were intelligent and reasonable, all our problems would be manageable. The trouble is that none of them manages to solve these problems himself. Christians often ask why God does not speak to them, as he is believed to have done in former days. When I hear such questions, it always makes me think of the rabbi who was asked how it could be that God often showed himself to people in the olden days, while nowadays nobody ever sees him. The rabbi replied, "Nowadays there is no longer anybody who can bow low enough." This answer hits the nail on the head. We are so captivated by and entangled in our subjective consciousness that we have forgotten the age-old fact that God speaks chiefly through dreams and visions. The Buddhist discards the world of unconscious fantasies as useless illusions. The Christian puts his church and his Bible between himself and unconscious. So I want to say that again, because Christians seem to think they know everything and oftentimes will terrorize people for not believing the way that they believe, at least the Christians who are in an established religion. Being the Bible thumpers they are, they can't think outside of what they've been indoctrinated to believe. So I'm going to read that again. It says, Carl Jung has written, the Christian puts his church and his Bible between himself and his unconscious. And the rational intellect does not yet know that his conscious is not his total psyche. So I was dealing with the First Baptist Church in Logan, Ohio for a short period of time when I ended up homeless there. And the pastor there told me that it was, he advised against meditation. And he actually frightens me. And he advised against using crystals. And he frightens me. He made me afraid. This ignorance persists today in spite of the fact that for more than 70 years, the unconscious has been a basic scientific concept that is indispensable to any serious psychological investigation. Sorry, I got some little buggies out here. We can no longer afford to be so God Almighty, like as to set ourselves up as judges of the merits or demerits of natural phenomena. We do not base our botany upon the old-fashioned distinction between the old-fashioned division into useful and useless plants, or our zoology upon the naive distinction between harmless and dangerous animals, but we still complacently assume that the conscious is sense and the unconscious is nonsense. In science, such an assumption would be laughed out of court. Do microbes, for instance, make sense or nonsense? Whatever the unconscious may be, it is a natural phenomenon producing symbols that prove to be meaningful. We cannot expect someone who has never looked through a microscope to be an authority on microbes. In the same way, no one who has not made a serious study of natural symbols can be considered a competent judge in this matter. So like in my book that I wrote about my life that ended up involving a lot of religious themes and symbols and motifs. I don't know much about them, but they were coming to me by divine order, and I have a hunch that a lot of people read it because I posted it online and I maybe upset some people. I'm sorry that you got upset. That's no reason to spiritually attack me. No matter what religion or cult or Wiccan coven you're from. Just because I wrote something that made you feel uncomfortable does not give you the right to spiritually attack me and terrorize me. My son was killed for money, and I stand on that. And it went right through the court system, and it upset me very much. It broke my heart, it broke my mind, and it broke my spirit. And I intend to speak on it until the day I die. That's why I wrote that book, because it's an important story, and I know I'm not an isolated case. I'm sorry if what I wrote, I'm not sorry. What I wrote upset you or offended you, maybe look in the mirror and ask yourself why. In the same way, no one who has not made a serious study of natural symbols can be considered a competent judge in this matter, which I never judged anything. I just wrote it down. I wrote the truth. But the general undervaluation of the human soul is so great. But the general undervaluation of the human soul is so great that neither the great religions, nor the philosophies, nor scientific rationalism has been willing to look at it twice. In spite of the fact that the Catholic Church admits the occurrence of somnia misas, dreams sent by God, most of its thinkers make no serious attempt to understand dreams. I doubt whether there is a Protestant treatise or doctrine that would stoop so low as to admit the possibility that vox dei, which is spelt Voxdei, might be perceived in a dream. But if a theologian really believes in God, by what authority does he suggest that God is unable to speak through dreams? I have spent more than a half a century in investigating natural symbols. I have come to the conclusion that dreams and their symbols are not stupid and meaningless. On the contrary, dreams provide the most interesting information for those who take the trouble to understand their symbols. The result is true. The results, it is true, have little to do with such worldly concerns as buying and selling, but the meaning of life is not exhaustively explained by one's business life, nor the deep desire of the human heart answered by a bank account, which I read that twice, and then I read it again this morning. All 3 times I was synthesized out. So I'm going to read it again in hopes that it takes. The results, it is true, have little to do with worldly concerns as buying and selling, but the meaning of life is not exhaustively explained by one's business life, nor is the deep desire of the human heart answered by a bank account. In a period of human history when all available energy is spent in the investigation of nature, very little attention is paid to the essence of man, which is his psyche. Although many researchers are made into its conscious functions, but the really complex and unfamiliar part of the mind from which symbols are produced is still virtually unexplored. It seems almost incredible that though we receive signals from it every night, deciphering these communications seems too tedious for any but a very few people to be bothered with it. Man's greatest instrument, his psyche, is little thought of and is often directly mistrusted and despised. It's only psychological too often means it is nothing. Where exactly does this immense prejudice come from? We have obviously been so busy with the question of what we think that we entirely forgot to ask what the unconscious psyche thinks about us. The ideas of Sigmund Freud confirmed for most people the existing contempt for the psyche. Before him, it had been merely overlooked and neglected. It has now become a dump for moral refuse. This modern standpoint is surely one-sided and unjust. It does not even accord with the known facts. Our actual knowledge of the unconscious shows that it is a natural phenomenon and that, like nature herself, it is at least neutral. It contains all aspects of human nature, light and dark. Oh, I just lost my spot. I like this line. Okay, I'm going to read it again. It contains all, the psyche contains all aspects of human nature, light and dark, beautiful and ugly, good and evil, profound and silly, and I added smart and stupid. The study of individual as well as of collective symbolism is an enormous task, and one that has not yet been mastered. But a beginning has been made at last. The early results are encouraging, and they seem to indicate an answer to many so far unanswered questions of present-day mankind. So I'm going to stop this recording. I'm going to play it again and see if it records well, and then I'm going to upload it to my YouTube channel. And I'm going to title it, and I'm going to do another recording that I recorded of today's chapter, which was synthesized out. Everyone, have a blessed, I think we're on Wednesday. I call it whatever I want to do Wednesday. I don't see my mom on Wednesdays. I let her practice being independent, which I also did with my son, because I believe, I never say this word right, but that we should all be sovereign powers unto ourselves. And she's doing really well. She's socializing with the other residents there. It's not a permanent placement for her, but I don't want her to come home yet because I'm going to be having to move out soon, and I don't have permanent housing, and I certainly can't have her homeless with me. So I'm grateful that she has a spot that she's being taken care of, and I can still come and visit her even if I am living in my car, which I will do. She's doing wonderfully. I'm very proud of her. I'm proud of the work we've done together. I cared for her just like I cared for my son, and she's made progress, and my son made enormous progress even though he was born dead. We beat all the odds. And if you've ever seen Helen Keller and her worker Anne Sullivan, I do like to relate myself to that storyline, because I was Anne Sullivan to Bodie Ely, and he made incredible strides. He was walking, talking, eating, riding motorcycles and dirt bikes out of a diaper. His G-tube was pulled, and then the state took him back and killed him. And that's the story, and that's the truth, and people might not like it, but I don't give a fuck.